AWS Loft Talks.
My name is Stephen Marshall, and I want to tell you a little bit about myself first because I want to it's a bit of a different talk I'm going to give. For 15 years, I was a filmmaker. I went to 70 or 80 countries in the world and was really focused on narrative as a way of changing the world. I really believe that storytelling could actually affect change. And wrote 3 books, did 3 features, won a Sundance Award, all that stuff. But at the end of that, I really ended up very disillusioned. And through a series of unconnected events, started learning about big data. I really came to see that as a non-technologist, that big data had an opportunity to tell us stories about ourselves that we couldn't see through our own eyes. And so I really started to get into it and realized that data visualization as a front end for big data could be a way of actually changing the way we see ourselves and architecting a paradigm shift. Now, those are big words, I know, but they are ones that sort of carried me to where I am here now, and I want to just tell you a bit about that. So basically, one of the first things I saw was this amazing piece by an artist named Luxury of Protest. He's a genetics PhD, left his genetics work and went into data visualization, and he actually mapped the Detroit techno scene as a sun. And every one of the coronal flares in the sun was the success of a record that occurred from a certain label called an underground protest. And it was like the idea that we could build natural forms that would actually represent data in a storytelling way to me was fascinating. It gripped me, and I actually started a long sort of study of data visualization. For me, it was new. And so I really realized very quickly there was standard data visualization in terms of math, and there was art. When I looked at the actual products that were available, it was amazing because the two-dimensional data visualization, which we see in business intelligence, really hasn't changed that much since like the 1850s. It's still two-dimensional. It's not dynamic, and it really relies on the person who's viewing it to make decisions. So I went further than that. I wanted to go into 3D, and I looked into data physicalization, and that's obviously the creation of objects from data, 3-dimensional objects which can tell stories. Great examples of that, the Inca were doing that in 2500s. They were building these necklaces, which essentially were data visualizations. They were objects that contained data and told the stories of it. The more recent stuff, more high-end art, taking earthquake data and building and manufacturing artifacts from those things. Very interesting, I thought. Still not quite enough. Not quite enough for us to take big data, build dynamic modules which can communicate to any person in the world something about the data that is within it, and also tell it its secrets. So I started forming an idea in my mind that we really needed a new type of visualization, something that would take live data. So in other words, data coming off medical machines, it's data coming off stock market rules, anything, and actually drive live dynamic visualizations. More importantly, I realized most of the important sort of storytelling components of big data is in the interference of the data. The way data flows interfere with each other. That's a critical thing that is not currently displayed in data visualization. Thirdly, how do you take multiple flows of data and build aggregate pictures of it so that it expresses it in a way that tells us a picture? So that led me to something called generative code. So generative code, and I'm just going to read this, dynamically generates and morphs objects through a system of inputs which are either controlled by the viewer, directed, or from external sources, passive. So there's about 10 or 15 generative coders in the world today. I became associated with them because one of my best friends is design-directed Tron Legacy, which wasn't a great film, but in terms of actual holographic content, they had $1 million plus budget for a couple of coders to come in and write algorithms that were generating visuals from that code. Pure code written for the generation of objects in a chaotic manner, which later on became a core aspect of the feature film. Since then, films like Prometheus, Interstellar have deployed the same kind of artists. Millions and millions of dollars have been spent in film for these types of algorithms, but nothing has been spent in terms of product in the marketplace. I thought that was really fascinating. So I went and started meeting these people. Marcin Ignac is one of the top data visual sort of generative coders in the world today. So basically, Marcin has done work with Nike, and he's worked with major companies. But one of the cooler things I saw was his taking of trading data from the Asian fuel markets and the building of objects that were tracking every trade that was happening around the fuel markets. I thought it was really cool. Still, not necessarily something that was going to drive us and change our behavior, but definitely a cool narrative approach. I went and met Marcin, and he now works with our company. One of the great sort of data visualization guys is Reza Ali. So Reza did all of the visuals for deadmau. He's one of the top generative coders in the world. This is a great example of pure sound driving code to build and drive freeform object computation. I think it's really beautiful. Again, it's just, even Reza would tell you himself that this is, you can turn it down again. Even Reza would tell you himself, this is not meaningful data visualization. It's a toy, but it's a very powerful toy. Because if you can imagine big data rolling off the stacks and actually generating objects that change and mutate based on the data narrative within, that's a paradigm shift. As a planet who cannot as a group look at ourselves objectively and make decisions as a group, we need to make these kind of toys for ourselves to see ourselves. And so when I started seeing this stuff, it was really cool. So at this time, I started Aura. It was a dimensional data visualization company. I had a deck, and I got into an accelerator in town called Data Elite. It was founded by a couple of Greek venture capitalists, and on our advisory board, we had all the top data scientists from Netflix, LinkedIn, Facebook, Riot, the whole crew. And one of the guys, Ken Rudin, is the head of data for Facebook. And we talked about what I was doing and what I wanted to do. And he was like, it's really a question of just what it's going to look like. It's really, because think about what they're doing at Facebook. They've basically taken a 2D list, which is our identity, and they've poured it into our mobile devices. Mobile devices which, through touch, allow us to actually explore time and space. And yet we're still just going like this. I was like, Ken, couldn't we think of ourselves in terms of driving identity, in terms of object-based computing? He said, yeah, but you got to go figure out what it's going to look like. And so I went back to my sort of like initial point of inception with Peter. And I was like, natural systems. Could we start thinking about natural algorithms, like the ones that drive the growth of plants, as algorithms that could drive data visualization? Could we not code that way? Could data that is now not like flows, but actually comes in lakes, not build and sort of germinate a new form of organism, which we could see ourselves in? That was my focus. And the more I thought about it, the more I realized the world is one massive object-based data visualization platform. All of these things are driven by data, whether it's like the weather, the amount of moisture in the air, the things in the soil. This is all a form of data visualization. And so I formed our company on that idea. We look at this. What is this? This is a form of data visualization. This is actually a 3-year-old child's brain. This came out recently. This is a child who's been nurtured probably by his mother for 2 years, or for 3 years. This is a neglected child. Data visualization, object-based data visualization. Where are we going? I really am interested, and one of the reasons I wanted to do this talk was to sort of raise the issue. Can we not think in terms of building objects that are non-deterministic, in which the algorithms drive things that we're not sure they're going to create, that we can then learn from? Can they be based on naturally occurring systems? Can the signals be intuitive? If we can do that, then essentially we're going to be at the beginning of a new realm. I really think we're in some ways in the infancy of computing. The power of the cloud and the power of the computational power devices we have today in mobile means we can generate a new form of identity for ourselves personally, which can become a digital mirror, which we don't have currently. In the Renaissance, we had the mirror. It changed the way we are as people today. We have no digital mirror that shows us in any way how we act and behave digitally. That is incredible. The healing occurs by seeing ourselves from a distance. What I'm talking about here, and I lost the beginning of the slide, is the overview effect. I'll just end with this. Astronauts talk about an experience they have when they go into outer space and they look at the Earth from a distance. It transforms the way they are as human beings because they see the place they live in. Most of us cannot say we've had that experience. So how can we actually act in our own best interest? If we can actually create an overview effect using our data so we can see ourselves from a distance, we will architect a paradigm shift, and that's what I call engineering God mode. Thank you.
AWS Loft Talks.